She's on. No, you know what I have to do? All right, abracadabra, let's go. So I go and get some of the, well, we can just throw them. We don't have, but then we'll make a pile of good ones. Okay. Here is, that's probably, there seems to be no end to the mystery. Well, this isn't just really good. What do you make it from? Glue.
I know.
Last
I didn't realize I was going to.
But you know, when we bought this house, and we bought some people who live up there, I had cousins that live up there, and cousins that live up there. And we bought the house.
Family?
Yeah, all over the place. But the ones that live up there, we bought the house from. And anyway, this was a dump. I don't think they'd actually been dumping here. This whole area had broken glass, tin cans, and get it out of here. Now we go. I can make about one. But anyway, and then thing. So what I do is I think one needs to go up and come back. I think it's down. Oh, down? Down? Maybe it'll fall down as well. When it top. I think sound is really good. Why not stop? I was thinking the dog was in. Well, I planted on getting through. Oh.
Try not to gesture quite so much about point to things, because that.
I should point to.
No,
okay.
because it doesn't seem like you're talking about serious matters then.
We're not. What?
You're going to somebody else after this?
No, but my daughter is doing
Yeah, turn in the driveway.
You through with it? I mean, yes.
Yeah, I just want to. You tell us about.
Start again.
Okay. I'm talking with Janet, and Janet, could you just give us some history about how you became an activist?
Okay. Well, I guess there'd be two things that influenced me. One was my father, who was a New York State senator and a very good man, and he would have stayed in politics, but he found he couldn't support a family. But I always admired what he did. And then when we were living in Nebraska, which we were in the 50s, I guess, I was scrubbing the kitchen floor one day when the head of Nebraskans for Peace called me, and she said, "How would you like to go to Iran?" And I had been in Iran during, in the Foreign Service, the U.S. Foreign Service, earlier years. And this was during the days of Mossadegh and all of the problems they were having in Iran. And they were sending a Oh, well, that's enough of that story?
No. I'm sorry. I wanted you to look more at me, but
Oh.
Janet, how did you get interested in politics originally?
I think it was my father, because he was a New York State Senator for a few years. And, so we got lots of dose of it at home, and he was a good and very progressive. He was involved with Teddy Roosevelt and some of the more progressive things that Teddy Roosevelt did. And then...
How old were you when he was in politics?
Oh, I must have been a young teenager. And but then he quit because he just found he couldn't support a family. There were 4 children in my family, and he found he couldn't support a family on the kind of money he made in politics. So he became a lawyer. He was a lawyer, but I mean, he started practicing law. But the other major thing was, gosh, I should have thought about this earlier. I guess it was in 1948. But anyway, it was when the Iranians took the Americans as hostages. Do you remember that? They took over the American embassy, and they just kept everybody in the embassy, and they didn't let them go home. They closed up the embassy. It was quite an extraordinary time. Well, I was living in Nebraska at that point, and this man decided he was going to send a delegation over to talk to these people. And I was involved in an organization called Nebraskans for Peace, and they asked me if I'd like to go, and I said, oh yes, I've been in Iran, I love Iran. And so that was a perfectly amazing experience. We'd get together with these students that were holding the hostages in the evening, and they would discuss politics with us. And it really radicalized me, and it made me much more progressive than I had been before. Those are the 2 major things that got me into politics.
How did it?
ready, man.
So this was in the 50?
Let's see, 52. Yeah, it must have been in the early 50s. I honestly don't remember exactly when it was. I'd have to look it up. Yeah.
When you say it, what was it about the experience that radicalized
Well,
you?
I was so horrified at the sort of things the U.S. government had done, and the support that they had for this Iranian regime. And then, the Iranians, the reason the Iranians took the hostages was because they said if the U.S. took the Shah, and it was the Shah that the people were objecting to, he was the ruler. If they took the Shah into the United States, then they were going to take over the embassy. And I don't know whether the U.S. government didn't believe them, but anyway, he came to the United States. He was ill, and I think he went into a hospital in New York. But anyway, then they took over the embassy. And I don't remember how long it was after they took over the embassy that this progressive guy from Kansas he wanted to have 2 people from every state. And I was one of the 2 from Nebraska. The other one was a Catholic priest who was a fascinating man. But anyway, so we went over there. We were there for about 10 days. And they took us around and they showed us the lavish way the Shah had lived. We visited several palaces where he had gold faucets for, he had a special room for his parrots, and he had a special room for something, some other kind of animal, and then he had a palace for each of his children, and all of them had gold fixtures and all that sort of thing. And it was just a lifestyle, and then we would go to the slums and see how the people in the slums were living. And so it was a typical sort of third world at the worst. And it affected me just the way it was supposed to. I thought the United States government has been supporting this kind of a government, and I don't like it. I strongly disapprove. And there's very little in foreign policy that the U.S. government has done since that I've approved of. So anyway, but that was the beginning of my mind-bending experience. I've had no other experience like it, but I've had lots of interesting times. I've been to Nicaragua, and I've been to Cuba, and I loved Cuba. And,
before we get into that, I'm just wondering, you were part of Nebraskans for Peace?
Yes.
At that time?
Yeah.
And how had you gotten into that before the Iran experience?
Well, I wanted to be involved with a progressive group.
Uh-huh.
And I lived out in rural Nebraska. I lived in a small town of about 5,000. And this was headquartered in Lincoln. But I had started going in, they met once a month, which was really quite a lot for me since I had small children and was teaching school. But I tried to go in to their meetings, and I met all these. The town I lived in had nobody that was at all political, you know. But I'd go into Lincoln, which is where this organization was, and I would go, you know, to their meetings, and I would learn these things. And so then, when this opportunity came for these people to go to Iran, the men in Kansas contacted Nebraskans for Peace and said, "Can you find a couple of people to be delegates from Nebraska?" And I was one of the delegates. Perfectly extraordinary experience.
So before the Iran experience, though, you said you've been in the Foreign Service? Is
No,
that right?
after I graduated from college. I graduated from college in '42. That was the war had just started, and I went into the Navy, and I was a Navy officer until the end of the war. And then I got a job working for the U.S. mission to the United Nations in New York. And I worked there for a while. I guess it was a couple of years, I don't really remember how long. And some people from the State Department came up recruiting people to go overseas with the Foreign Service. And I had always been dying to go abroad. And so I went down and I was interviewed, and I got a job with a man as an assistant in the embassy in Tehran, Iran, and I just loved it. He was a wonderful boss, and I had a fascinating time. And I was there for 2 years, and then I didn't want to go back there. I'd gotten to know a lot of people, and I'd gotten more involved with some people than I wanted to. So when I went back to the State Department, I said I would love to go back to the Middle East, but I don't want to go back to Iran. So they very kindly sent me to Pakistan, and so I always went to. At that time, Karachi was the capital. It isn't anymore, but it was then. And so I was sent to Karachi, and that's where I met Denny, and we got married over there by the Archdeacon of Sindh and Baluchistan. It was great fun, and we went up into the mountains for our honeymoon. And anyway, it was. And then not too long after that, his term was up, and we came back to this country, and we were not young. He was 39. Let's see, he's 7 years older than I am. He was about 40, and I was 32 or 33. But anyway, we thought if we're going to have children, we better get on the ball and have children. And I wasn't sure I wanted to have children in the Middle East, so I persuaded him to stay in this country. He got a job in Nebraska, and we lived in Nebraska for many years. But I kept dreaming of Vermont. I finally got him to come here in the summers. We borrowed this house from my cousin, and then we ultimately bought it. And then after we bought it, we added on to it and stuff like that.
When you were, I just wanted to, before we get to Vermont, the Vermont section, time of your life, when you were in the Navy, were you?
I didn't.
Were you? I'm just wondering how you felt about United States.
I was a strong supporter. I was very rah-rah in those days. It wasn't really. I mean, I had some progressive instinct a little later. At that time, I don't even think I really thought much about politics. I don't know how I could have not, but I don't think I did. And no, I had no objection to anything the United States did. I look back on that with horror, you know, that it took me so long to wake up. But it wasn't really until I went to Iran, and I remember meeting some of the Americans on that delegation, and they were really interesting people. I was one of the older ones, really. They were mostly in their early 20s and stuff. And we would be in an elevator or something, and they'd say, "Well, where do you live?" And I'd say, "In Nebraska." And they would look on me with scorn. How could you live in Nebraska if you want to accomplish anything? You live in rural Nebraska. You've got to be in a city. If you're going to protest and influence people, you've got to be in a city. We did move to Lincoln. We sold our place in a little town in central Nebraska, and we moved to Lincoln, and we were half the time in Lincoln and half the time in Vermont for a long time. And I kept dreaming of getting Denny to move here full time. He didn't really want to live in the boondocks, but eventually I did. And but I would be politically involved in the winter in Nebraska. And
what kind of things were you?
Well, I remember the Iraq, war. You know, I remember standing on the corner of Lincoln, Nebraska, and I even had Denny on one end of this great big sign. We were with a group of people, but we happened to hold up the sign saying "U.S. out of Iraq." You know. But there was but another thing that I got very involved in fact, that's what I worked on the whole time I was in Nebraska, and particularly when I was in Lincoln, was the death penalty. I had the death penalty in Nebraska, and I became very fond of a woman who was quite a lot younger than me, who ran Nebraskans against the death penalty, and they still have the death penalty in Nebraska, and they executed one of the men I knew very well. It was just like executing a friend. He had committed a horrible crime, but he had been on death row for many years, and he had changed. There's another man that I correspond with. Two of the men I knew well have been executed.
How did you first get interested in
Well,
that?
through Nebraskans for Peace.
Uh-huh.
One time, this woman who ran Nebraskans for Peace said to me, would you like to work for Nebraskans against the death penalty? They're just setting up an office and they need help. And I thought, oh yes, it's something I've never been involved in, but it's something that I've always felt strongly about. And I certainly became involved in it. And I did, at one point, a couple of years ago, this man that I knew particularly well was threatened with an execution. And I went back to Nebraska to be there, which was a horrible thought. But anyway, we were having a protest in the federal building, and suddenly somebody screamed, and we all rushed over to see why she was screaming. And we just gotten a ruling by the Nebraska Supreme Court that they were going to stay his execution, and so that was why she was screaming. So we all screamed, and but I had spent with this other friend of mine almost the whole previous night in his cell with him, and that had been and he had really changed a lot, and he'd become quite a religious person, and all sorts of ministers from all parts of Nebraska came to see him, wish him well. We'd go in and out, the minister would go in and bless him and then come out and we'd go back in. But
Sorry, just, it doesn't matter. Count to about 5 to yourself and then start.
Well, as I think I mentioned, my strongest political awareness came as a result of my trip to Iran, when we saw the kind of government that the U.S. had supported in Iran, and I came back with a feeling that I was going to oppose a great deal of what the U.S. did abroad. And I did go to Nicaragua. I went to Nicaragua, I guess, a year after the Nicaraguan Revolution, and it was great fun. My son went with me, and he is not as politically active now as he was when he was a little bit younger, but he speaks very good Spanish, and so that made it a lot of fun to, because he could speak to anybody and ask anybody. And and then I also went to Cuba to see what the Cuban Revolution had been like, and that I found another extraordinary experience. I was very impressed with. I went with the North American Congress on Latin America, and the purpose of the trip was to study the educational system, and I wasn't really so interested in the educational system, but I just wanted an excuse to get to Cuba. And but in the process, we visited schools in much of the country, so I did see quite a lot of the country, and I had lots of opportunities to ask questions. And the schools were extraordinary. They were, compared to what they were like under Batista in the days before the Cuban Revolution. Everybody got to go to school, and if you had the ability, you didn't have to have a nickel to your name. You could go through school, college, and on to medical school, whatever, advanced training you want at the expense of the government. And if you didn't have the clothes, they clothed you. And so the people of Cuba, I feel, are very well educated. I certainly don't approve of everything that is done, but I'm a great admirer of what has been done in Cuba.
And the trip to Nicaragua, was that like this was that the same kind of a?
Yes, I wanted to see what the Nicaraguan Revolution, and it was just after the revolution, and there was Nicaragua now is such a terrible mess. The U.S. destroyed the whole thing. That's another example. and the Contras, you know, the Nicaraguans had to waste endless amounts of energy and resources in defeating the Contras, who the U.S. openly supported. And that was just very, very sad. And so Nicaragua is way worse than it was before the revolution. And under Somoza, I couldn't first think what his name was, but so, you know, my more recent travels have pretty much reinforced my disgust with things that the United.
When you say okay, right?
Okay.
So Janet, why do you stand in front of the post office once a month handing out leaflets? I mean,
well, I think that's absolutely vital. I think that this very conservative community, it is necessary for people to realize that not everybody is conservative, not everybody is satisfied with the way things are going. And I want everybody to know that I oppose a great many of the things that the United States government does. And I hand out a little leaflet that says that. But there's some people think that we're not really accomplishing anything. But I think if you just reach a few people, that's fine. And some of the people will take the leaflets and then they'll go in the post office and they'll put them in the waste paper basket. And then when I think there's enough in there, I'll go and take them out again.
okay.
Okay, if you want to know what this is the top thing I had on my very messy desk. These are my notes from my last meeting of Guatemala Watch, which was just a few days ago. And the situation, so many people think the situation in Guatemala has improved, and it is very, very bad. The first thing I have here is notes on the number of people who have been kidnapped this year, the number of people who have been destroyed, and it's very, very depressing. You want me to start now?
No. Wait a little bit and then start again.
Another thing I have on this very messy desk is the leaflet that we handed out, or that we put up in I'm responsible for Lyndonville, on our last North Country Coalition meeting, which was Youth Speak Out, which was held on October 7th. And I thought it was one of the best meetings we had. I was really impressed with the young people. And the young people were not impressed with the old people, and probably with good reason. But they discussed it, and they discussed it in a very articulate manner. And we had a good turnout. Unfortunately, good turnout's another specialty of the North Country Coalition. But maybe with all the work you're doing, more people will know about it.
What did you like about that meeting particularly? What made it strong, do you think?
I think the fact that I was impressed that they could discuss so knowledgeably their concerns. I had not expected it to be local concerns. I hadn't expected them to talk so much about St. Johnsbury and about the school, you know, because I figured if you object to the school, you should be talking about that in the school. You know, there should be school events where you can speak up. I expected to hear more about their concerns on national issues and international issues, which they didn't give very much. But I felt they were quite capable of it, and I was sure they had concerns because they were obviously intelligent young people. And they have an organization, I think it's called SAY or something like that, is that what it is? And I thought in a community like St. Johnsbury, that's great that they, and obviously they support us. And I would very much like to see something other than those few gray heads, you know, when we have demonstrations, when we have vigils, when we have meetings and so on.